We tend to think greatness is predictable, built with budgets, fame, and flawless plans. But in cinema, perfection often starts with chaos. And from there, action cinema could never go back to sleep. Hollywood worships control. Scripts are tested, stars are chosen, money decides the outcome. But once in a while, a film escapes that system. It breaks rules, it ignores warnings, it crashes through every boundary on sheer conviction. And against every odd, it works. Then came the moment that changed visual storytelling forever. Neo dodging bullets in slow motion, camera circling mid-air. Bullet time was born, and with it, a new cinematic language. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was timing, or maybe it was that rare moment when art becomes more honest in failure than success. Because sometimes, what shouldn't work does, and when it does, it burns brighter than anything designed to win. This is the story of those 15 cinematic rebellion, 15 action movies that should have collapsed, but instead made history. Fact 1. El Mariachi, 1992. It started not with money, but with blood. In 1992, Robert Rodriguez was just another young dreamer who couldn't afford to dream. No studio, no crew. Just a $7,000 plan to make a Spanish-language action movie for local video stores. To raise that money, he volunteered for medical experiments, literally trading his blood for film stock. He wrote El Mariachi, a story about a wandering musician mistaken for a killer. It was shot in dusty Mexican towns, using locals as actors and props scavenged from wherever he could find them. The crew was whoever showed up that day. The guns were fake, the stunts improvised, the sound dubbed later in his bedroom. By every rule, it should have failed. But someone at Columbia Pictures saw the raw VHS copy and recognized something bigger than polished, pure, kinetic storytelling. El Mariachi exploded onto the indie scene, winning Sundance and launching Rodriguez's career. A film born from medical testing and borrowed tape became a rallying cry for independent filmmakers everywhere. It wasn't meant to reach Hollywood. It was meant to survive it. And next, another director would build a legend with even less and change the sound of the apocalypse. Maybe that's why we keep coming back to them, because they remind us that creation doesn't come from safety, it comes from risk. The road to cinematic immortality began with a broken camera and stolen cars. In 1979, George Miller, a former doctor, decided to film a story about a crumbling world obsessed with speed. He had a budget smaller than most car commercials and a cast no one had heard of. Mel Gibson was just a drama student who came to the audition with a bruised face. Miller hired him immediately. The crew shot Mad Max illegally on public highways, strapping cameras to motorcycles and chasing real traffic. Stunts were done without safety permits, sometimes without rehearsals. The explosions? Real gasoline. What should have been a disaster turned into something primal. Mad Max felt raw because it looked dangerous, because it truly was. The chaos behind the scenes became part of its identity. Audiences around the world responded. A $350,000 movie from Australia grossed over $100 million, redefining what action could look like without Hollywood. The twist? American distributors thought the accents were too thick, so they dubbed the entire film. But nothing could silence the roar that started there. A revolution was born in the desert, and from that fire, another director would find perfection in confinement. Fact #3, The Raid, Redemption, 2011. What happens when you put 20 men, one building, and no backup plan? You get The Raid. In 2011, Welsh filmmaker Gareth Evans was living in Indonesia, exploring a martial art called Pencak Silat. He had no major funding, no star power, just an idea. A police team trapped inside a high-rise controlled by a ruthless gang. Fact #3, The Raid, Redemption, 2011. Shot with handheld cameras in a real abandoned building, The Raid turned claustrophobia into choreography. Every kick, punch, and fall was rehearsed to near perfection, then filmed in long takes that made the pain feel tangible. The actors weren't actors, they were fighters. The sound of impact was real. The movie's budget couldn't afford CGI or spectacle, but it didn't need them. The Raid delivered something Hollywood had forgotten: rhythm, precision, brutality as art. Shot with handheld cameras in a real abandoned building, The Raid turned claustrophobia into choreography. Every kick, punch, and fall was rehearsed to near perfection, then filmed in long takes that made the pain feel tangible. The actors weren't actors, they were fighters. The sound of impact was real. It was supposed to be a training exercise for a bigger project. Instead, it became a defining moment in action cinema. It wasn't meant to be global, but it changed how the world viewed action. Fact #4, John Wick, 2014. They said revenge was dead. Keanu Reeves disagreed. When John Wick was first pitched, it sounded ridiculous. A grieving hitman avenges his puppy. Every studio passed. The script floated through Hollywood like a bad joke, but Reeves saw something there. The quiet myth of a man who'd lost everything but precision. Two stuntmen, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, stepped up to direct. They weren't filmmakers yet, just experts in controlled chaos. Together, they reinvented how modern violence looked. No shaky cameras, no fast cuts. Every move rehearsed like choreography, every kill filmed like a dance. Reeves trained relentlessly. Firearms, judo, jiu-jitsu, the works. What came to life wasn't a man shooting guns, it was a language of movement, a new kind of poetry through combat. The film built its own strange mythology. Gold coins, assassins' hotels, sacred rules. It felt ancient and new at the same time. John Wick opened modestly, then word spread. Fans saw something pure again, craft, not noise. A myth disguised as a gunfight. It shouldn't have worked. It wasn't supposed to work. But it didn't just resurrect a career, it launched an empire. And decades earlier, another broken man's story almost ended until one decision saved him. Fact #5. First Blood, 1982. Before the bandanas and the explosions, there was silence. First Blood began as a story about a soldier who couldn't find peace, a man too trained to live among the unbroken, but nobody wanted to make it. For 10 years, studios passed. Too dark, too depressing, too honest. By the time Sylvester Stallone signed on, the script had been rewritten more than 24 times. The ending? Rambo kills himself. Stallone refused. He believed survival was the only victory left for a man like Rambo. That change altered cinematic history. What emerged wasn't patriotic spectacle, it was an emotional thriller about trauma and alienation. Rambo wasn't a hero, he was a wound. The film's realism shocked audiences. No triumph, no glamour, just the aftermath of war brought home. Yet that honesty hit harder than any explosion could. First Blood became a global success, birthing a misunderstood icon. The twist? Stallone's rewrite wasn't studio approved. It was a last-minute gamble that saved both the film and the character. Sometimes, mercy writes a better ending than death. Next came a movie that dared to center on a bus and turn speed into legend. Fact #6. Speed. 1994. A bus. A bomb. A single rule. Stay above 50 miles per hour. It sounded like a parody, not a blockbuster. Speed began as a low-priority project that no one believed in. The script was thin, the concept absurd. But director Jan de Bont, a cinematographer making his debut, saw potential in its simplicity. He knew that tension, not dialogue, could drive a story. Keanu Reeves stripped the role of all bravado, no macho one-liners, no swagger. Sandra Bullock, then an unknown, carried the heart of the film with nervous charm. And the stunts? Real. The explosions? Practical. The camera never looked away. One sequence where the bus jumps a broken freeway became iconic. It was done with an actual bus and a hidden ramp. The actors' screams weren't rehearsed, they were genuine fear caught on film. The studio nearly released it without music, thinking silence would build suspense. The score arrived 2 weeks before release and transformed the film's rhythm. When Speed hit theaters, it didn't crawl, it detonated. Proof that you don't need complexity to create adrenaline. You just need motion and the courage not to stop. But what happens when the man behind the next hit wasn't even supposed to be an action hero? Fact #7. Taken 2000. He wasn't the hero they expected, he was the threat they never saw coming. By the late 2000s, Liam Neeson wasn't exactly Hollywood's idea of an action star. He was known for gravitas, not gunfire for playing mentors, not killers. When Taken began filming, most thought it was a forgettable European thriller destined for DVD shelves. It was made fast and cheap under Luc Besson's production house, directed by Pierre Morel, and shot with no American stars, no studio muscle, and no expectations. Neeson himself assumed it would vanish quietly. Then came that scene. I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you. 18 seconds, one phone call, and suddenly, the world saw him differently. That calm menace, the slow burn of a man weaponizing love, ignited a phenomenon. Taken earned more than $220 million, turning Neeson into an unlikely icon of midlife vengeance and sparking a wave of imitators. The twist? The movie didn't just resurrect his career, it created an entirely new subgenre, the aging Avenger thriller. Sometimes, what Hollywood sees as the end is just the start of another fight. And in another war, a soldier would die over and over to finally live once. Fact Hashite, Edge of Tomorrow, 2014. If you die every day, how long until you stop fearing death? Edge of Tomorrow had every reason to fail. A confusing title, a marketing disaster, a concept that sounded like Groundhog Day with Alien. But beneath all that noise, Doug Liman's film carried a bold idea: failure as evolution. Tom Cruise played a coward, a man forced into battle, killed instantly, and trapped in a time loop. Each death reset the day, forcing him to learn, adapt, and die again. Alongside him, Emily Blunt's stoic soldier, the Angel of Verdun, turned training into torment. Together, they built rhythm out of repetition, but Warner Brothers didn't know how to sell it. Posters were mismatched, trailers misleading. The film stumbled in theaters, but soared after release. Viewers discovered its brilliance, relentless pacing, dark humor, and a rare emotional honesty about endurance. When the Blu-ray came out, its tagline, "Live, Die, Repeat," became its real title. It shouldn't have worked. But like its hero, it learned from every mistake. And before it, there was a film that taught us to question reality itself one frame at a time. Fact #9. The Matrix, 1999. It began as a question, what if the world isn't real? And it ended by rewriting how we see film forever. And before it, there was a film that taught us to question reality itself one frame at a time. But Warner Brothers gave them one chance to film a single action sequence as proof of concept. The Wachowskis spent almost everything on the lobby shootout, a ballet of bullets and debris. It worked. Keanu Reeves trained for months, mastering martial arts and wire work. The result wasn't just action, it was belief. The combination of philosophy, physics, and style created a world that felt like revelation. When audiences first saw Neo dodge bullets in slow motion, the cinema itself changed speed. The film earned 4 Oscars and a permanent place in cultural DNA. But Warner Brothers gave them one chance to film a single action sequence as proof of concept. The Wachowskis spent almost everything on the lobby shootout, a ballet of bullets and debris. It worked. The twist, even with its legacy, no one at the time truly understood it. Not the studio, not the critics, not even some of the actors. And next, a movie would take that awakening, rip out the brakes, and hit full throttle. Fact #0. Crank, 2006. Imagine an action movie that feels like a panic attack caught on camera. That's Crank. Released in 2006, it starred Jason Statham as a hitman, injected with a deadly poison that will kill him the moment his heart slows down. The story wasn't about logic, it was about velocity. The directors, Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor, didn't care about convention. They wanted chaos, raw, dirty, electric chaos. They filmed Crank like a fever dream, sprinting through Los Angeles with handheld digital cameras, skating between cars, dangling off cranes. No storyboards, no safety nets. Every shot felt improvised because it was. The result was an adrenaline overload, part video game, part madness. It shouldn't have worked. Critics didn't know what to call it, a joke, a meltdown, or a masterpiece. But audiences, especially younger ones, felt something real in its insanity. Statham performed many stunts himself, including standing on a motorcycle at full speed. The film broke every cinematic rule, then laughed about it. It was never meant to be taken seriously. But that's what made it unforgettable. Crank proved that sometimes the only way to make art out of chaos is to never hit pause. And out of chaos, another filmmaker would create order from the wreckage of someone else's dream. Fact #9. District 9, 2009. The greatest science fiction stories don't begin with space, they begin with failure. Neil Blomkamp was a young South African filmmaker hired to direct the big-budget adaptation of Halo. But when the project collapsed, producer Peter Jackson told him to make anything with the scraps that were left. So Blomkamp did. He took the technology meant for Halo, mixed it with apartheid politics, and created District 9, a film about aliens stranded in Johannesburg and a bureaucrat infected by their DNA. It was filmed documentary style, with handheld grit and real South African locations. No stars, no gloss, no Hollywood artifice. Lead actor Charlton Copley wasn't even a trained actor. He improvised much of his dialogue. What came out was brutal, human, and uncomfortably real. The aliens weren't invaders, they were refugees. Against all odds, District 9 earned 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. The film became a mirror, showing how easily oppression wears a human face. The irony? The movie about alien apartheid began as a video game adaptation. Failure birthed something far more dangerous: truth, and if District 9 blurred reality, the next film erased it completely, putting you inside the hero's skull. Against all odds, District 9 earned 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. The film became a mirror, showing how easily oppression wears a human face. Fact Hassan 2, Hardcore Henry, 2015. In 2015, Russian musician Ilya Naishuller decided to direct a movie entirely in first-person perspective, shot through the eyes of its main character. No traditional cameras, no actors facing the audience, just GoPros mounted on helmets, sprinting through a world of bullets and blood. It was funded partly through Indiegogo, with fans paying for the insanity they wanted to see. The story? A resurrected man fighting to save his wife. Simple. But the execution? Unlike anything before it, the film was chaos incarnate, fast, dizzying, brutal. Critics couldn't decide whether it was genius or nausea in motion, but it became a sensation among action purists, gamers, and adrenaline junkies who had never seen cinema move like this before. The director often filmed scenes himself, running, falling, even bleeding for a shot. There was no barrier between viewer and experience, only impact. It shouldn't have worked, but it did because it turned disorientation into design. Hardcore Henry wasn't storytelling, it was survival. And soon, another masked hero would remind Hollywood that less can mean everything. Fact Hassan 3, Dread, 2012. Sometimes redemption hides behind a helmet. After the 1995 Judge Dredd disaster, the character was radioactive in Hollywood. A reboot seemed pointless until a quiet, low-budget version emerged from the shadows. No marketing blitz, no superstar, just Carl Urban, a lockjaw, and a promise: he never takes the helmet off. That single choice changed everything. Shot in Johannesburg on a limited budget, Dredd became a minimalist siege film. 2 law enforcers trapped in a skyscraper run by criminals. Its world was filthy, claustrophobic, and brilliantly choreographed. The drug slow-mo turned violence into beauty bullets, hung in the air like frozen raindrops, filmed with phantom cameras at thousands of frames per second. Critics praised its precision and brutality, but the studio buried it. Almost no marketing, almost no release. Dredd vanished from theaters, only to rise again through word of mouth and home video. Fans discovered what studios didn't: a raw, faithful adaptation, truer than anything money could buy. The irony? A movie that hit its hero's face became one of the most honest depictions of heroism in modern action. Dredd didn't scream, it whispered, and the echo still hasn't faded. And from the darkness of a megablock came the bright chaos of a teenage vigilante with no powers at all. Fact Hassan 4, Kick-Ass, 2010. What if superheroes were real and terrible at it? Kick-Ass wasn't supposed to see the light of day. The violence was too graphic, the tone too cynical, the humor too obscene. Every major studio passed, so director Matthew Vaughn paid for it himself, shooting independently, without permission, without safety nets. The story followed Dave, a teenage nobody who dons a green suit and decides to fight crime with no skills, no training, and no idea how. The result? Bruised bones, bloodied faces, and uncomfortable laughter. But the breakout wasn't the wannabe hero, it was Hit Girl, and one-year-old assassin who swore like a soldier and killed like a storm. Chloe Grace Moretz's performance stunned audiences, dividing critics between outrage and awe. Kick-Ass wasn't supposed to see the light of day. The violence was too graphic, the tone too cynical, the humor too obscene. Every major studio passed, so director Matthew Vaughn paid for it himself, shooting independently, without permission, without safety nets. The story followed Dave, a teenage nobody who dons a green suit and decides to fight crime with no skills, no training, and no idea how. The result? Bruised bones, bloodied faces, and uncomfortable laughter. Sometimes, rebellion wears a cape. And finally, we end where it began. One man, one myth, one last battle he could never walk away from. Fact Hassan 5. Rambo, Last Blood, 2019. He had already survived everything: war, loss, legend. But peace? That was the one thing Rambo couldn't win. When Rambo, Last Blood was announced, few cared. The franchise was old, the formula outdated. But Stallone wasn't trying to revive a hero, he was trying to bury one. Set decades after the original, the film found Rambo living on a ranch, tending horses and ghosts. When his surrogate daughter is kidnapped, the quiet breaks. What follows isn't grand or glamorous, it's grim, personal, and soaked in vengeance. The violence was shocking even by Rambo's standards. Critics condemned it, but fans saw something else: closure. The old warrior still fighting the same war, this time underground literally. The tunnels beneath his home became his final battlefield. Despite the backlash, Last Blood doubled its budget and gave Rambo the farewell he deserved. Not triumphant, not heroic, human. The irony? The franchise that began with survival ended the same way. He wasn't supposed to come back, but he did, because myths never die quietly. Bonus fact: Equilibrium, 2002. Some films are too quiet to be heard when they first arrive. Equilibrium was one of them. In 2002, it appeared and disappeared, almost instantly dismissed as a Matrix imitation, forgotten before it could speak. But time would prove it was something far more unsettling. A vision of what happens when emotion itself becomes the enemy. In a sterile future where art, love, and anger are outlawed, Christian Bale plays a government enforcer whose duty is to destroy all feeling. But one small act of rebellion, a flicker of compassion, breaks his world open. The film had no major studio push, no big budget, and no marketing muscle. Critics ignored it. The box office barely noticed. Yet beneath the cold surfaces and gunfire lay something hauntingly poetic. Director Kurt Wimmer created the gun kata, a geometric style of combat where mathematics replaced instinct. It was ridiculous. It was mesmerizing. It was original. Years later, Equilibrium found its audience pass from one fan to another, whispered about in online forums as the hidden masterpiece of early 2000s action cinema. Its failure became its strength. Its silence became its echo. Because sometimes, the films that feel nothing are the ones that make us feel the most. So maybe it isn't luck that makes a film last, it's defiant. Every movie on this list broke a rule, ignored a warning, or survived a failure that should have buried it. And somehow, that chaos became art. They were underfunded, underestimated, and unforgettable. They didn't fit the system, so they built their own. Maybe that's why we keep coming back to them. Because they remind us that creation doesn't come from safety, it comes from risk. Tell me, which one of these cinematic accidents do you think turned out to be destiny?